Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I am CA Megha Saxena, Secretary to Auditing and Assurance Standards Board of ICI. On behalf of the board, today I welcome you to this seminar on audit sampling SA 530. We have with us Mr. PK Ranganathan, who is a very eminent speaker for explaining the session today. We all know that the audit, it's not possible to check each and every transaction. So that's how the audit sampling comes into play. So SA 530 describes the different methods of sampling and also enumerate and enunciate the situation where the auditor is supposed to take the decision, and it also provides us a various kind of guidance and putting various scenario. It is really about using the judgment to test few samples so that we can conclude for all. But the key point is that the sample should represent the whole population. Then only we can trust the result. The good sampling not only saves the time, but it reduces the efforts and also improves and enhances the confidence of the auditor while opining on the financial statements. So it helps us in variations and also assess whether the evidence gathered are strong enough or not. So in today's session, we have with us Mr. Ranganathan, who will be explaining the standard in detail by putting some practical scenarios also. So I will briefly give his introduction. Mr. Ranganathan has served the Hinduja Group for an impressive 38 years, holding key leadership positions such as VP Internal Audit and Risk Management at Ashok Leyland and the CFO for Hinduja Foundries and Lanka Ashok Leyland. Mr. Ranganathan has been the recipient of several prestigious honors, including the CFO Innovation of the Year and CFO Lifetime Achievement Awards, and was also recognized among the top 3 internal audit leaders in India by Walters Kluwer's. Under his leadership, Ashok Leyland received the national recognition for its excellence in enterprise risk management and internal audit practices. Presently, he serves as advisor and head of finance at Feed Forward Technology, known as Conven, where he is also leads to the government business initiative on AI-driven projects. Mr. Ranganathan is also an active member of several professional and industrial bodies, including CII, FICCI, ASHOCHAN, MMA, and the ICI. And he continues to guide in force in domains like finance, governance, technology, and ESG, etc. So now I'll be handing over to the Mr. PK Ranganathan to take the session further.
Thank you very much. It is indeed a pleasure to be again connected with AASB in this webinar series. Earlier, I had the opportunity and honor to present a webinar on audit quality in end of July, I believe. And now again, this one on SA 530, namely audit sampling, which is also very critical to the auditor as well as to the audit quality. It gives me pleasure as well as goosebumps to be back in this particular forum and meet our fellow chartered accountants and others who are assembled to hear this particular topic and the nuances of this audit sampling. I go straight into the topic. This will be my walkthrough in terms of this particular session. I will just touch upon what are the concepts, objectives, and scope of this particular standard. What are the different types of sampling and design considerations are there? In terms of a misstatement, how do you evaluate and project the misstatements? And what are the comparison of this particular standard with international standards like ISA, PCAOB, AACPA, etc.? What are the practical applications of this sampling in statutory audit, internal audit, and in the modern era of technology supported audit? And again, what exactly do we mean by artificial intelligence and computer assisted audit techniques, which are also part of the sampling process, but done through a technological support? How do we face them? And is there any possibility that is there any necessity that we need to integrate SA 530 with other standards while performing the audit? And in case we have to do so, what are all the various aspects to be considered and looked into in terms of such an integration? Are there any challenges and practical common errors while we perform audit sampling? And what do we gain by way of a value proposition from this particular audit sampling? Is it from random selection to risk based intelligence, or is it something else? This will be the summation of what I am going to discuss today in this forum. The art and science of sampling, before I get into this particular quotation from a very important audit book, we all know what is sampling. Sampling is something like, how do we measure the rightfulness of a large population with reference to the quality, content, and other parameters of that population by choosing a small portion of the population and testing it whether this particular sample or whether this particular sample size we have taken reflects the entire population in the context. The very practical application of sampling comes in many of these engineering, automobile, and other electronic goods industry, where the very important part of the manufacturing process is inventory. Inventory is the key component of any manufacturing process. So if you consider inventory as a major uh, contributory part in any manufacturing process, where, for example, a company like Tata Motors manufacturing lakhs and lakhs of vehicles and their components running to even crores of components for the manufacture of different type of vehicles, it may not be humanly possible for a person in the stores or in the quality section to completely rave through every size of consignment that has come on a daily basis. For a production of approximately, say, about thousands of vehicles, you may be receiving lakhs of components. So an environment of this type, it is not possible, it is not humanly intelligible also to have the entire size of the inventory that has been received by the store or the quality people. So in the practical situation of an inventory, they apply a statistical sampling or some other method of sampling which are allowed by the quality control processes. There is a quality standard which permits a very typical existence of a sampling process in a manufacturing situation, whether it is material received or other things. Therefore, they apply a particular sampling method in order to arrive at whether the quantity, say for example 1 lakh pieces of a spark plug come from Bosch to Tata Motors on a particular day. It is not possible to go through the entire 1 lakh pieces to test whether everyone is functionally correct, functionally reliable, good, and there is no damage, visual as well as qualitative damage to the product. Therefore, they perform sometimes. Some of the components may be tested for purpose of performance testing. Some of the components may be tested for purpose of visual testing. Some may be tested for purpose of run and reliability. So these are all type of the quality standards which audio sampling standards which are permitted in the quality books. Similarly, the auditing also undergoes through a sampling process. In a company like, say, Ashok Leyland or Tata Motors or any of these big companies, the volume of data, the volume of the documents that are generated are huge and humongous. Even in a situation of today's context of technology being available to run through the entire population, it may not be technically possible and feasible for an auditor to go through complete verification of every document in the population. It is so even today in the technology driven world. And therefore, even in such a situation of a technology supported audit, the auditors go through a process whereby they select a particular size of the sample out of the population and test the sample in the given way in which the auditing standards permit, the global auditing standards permit, and then come to a conclusion whether the population reflects the reliability of the company's transaction processing or company's numbers that are presented, the efficacy of the financial reporting and statements, all that are done through this quality sample process. I just want to bring across here one quotation from a famous book called An Integrated Auditing and Assurance Services, an Integrated Approach written by Arrains, Elder, and Beasley. The quotation runs like this: Audit sampling is the art of drawing reasonable assurance from limited evidence. It reflects the auditor's professional judgment in balancing efficiency with reliability, using representative subsets to form conclusion about the universe. Universe means population. As Arens and Elder describe, sampling is not a shortcut, but a disciplined process and method of focusing audit effort where it matters most. When applied with rigor and skepticism, sampling transforms uncertainty into assurance and professional judgment into audit evidence. The entire context and contents of the SA 530 has been completely brought in this particular one quotation from the famous book. What all the standard prescribes in terms of reasonable assurance, limited evidence, professional judgment, efficiency and reliability, representative subsets, universe being tested, sampling, and a disciplined method of focusing on audit, and skepticism and rigor in sampling process. So these are all the major contents in the SA 530 which have been brought out in this one particular paragraph. And I loved this paragraph very much, primarily because it gives a very elite form of description about how the global standards look at audit sampling as a major process for concluding the audit, conducting and concluding the audit. In this process, as we now gone through this particular paragraph, there are major 5 postulates, I would say postulates, which need to be considered as objectives of the sampling. 1. Obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence while testing only part of the population. So this is one objective, as we saw in that particular paragraph quotation. So in order to test this objective in an environment of audit sampling, what is the right process to be adopted? Define the population clearly. Ensure it is homogeneous and relevant to the audit objective. Very importantly, what the population is, we need to understand and ensure that there is a relevance to this audit objective. Determine the suitable sample size. Apply the key audit procedures consistently to the selected sample items. So this is one postulate which needs to be tested through a defined process, as in 530. What is this standard going to give us? Clarity in population ensures credibility in the conclusion arrived at by the auditor. The second postulate is reduce audit risk to acceptably low level through representative testing. So, what we need to do, identify the risk associated with material misstatement of the each process of sampling that we are adopting for each type of population. It could be bank statements, it could be journal vouchers, it could be payment vouchers, it could be something relating to manufacturing happening in a particular day, GRNs generated in a particular day, inspection reports generated in a particular day. What all that comes up for the purpose of audit evidence to be checked, this particular audit sampling process is to be applied in order to ensure that there is no material misstatement that applies or that is arising out of such testing. Then what we need to do is align the sampling method, whether we choose a random sampling method. Random doesn't mean essentially something off the hook. There's a process adopted for random method, random sampling, or systematic, done through a system, through the technology or device support. Stratified sampling, which sometimes we choose according to the period, or choose according to the customers who are in the population, or choose according to the area of the company's geographical spread, where the concentration of the sales is happening. So these type of sampling methods are applied in order to assess the given risk and evaluate the deviation, namely the misstatements that can arise, and what type of qualitative impact can be arrived at through that process. The key takeaway again here is sampling without risk assessment is testing without direction, is like testing without direction. Therefore, risk assessment is a key process of the sample testing. Then the third objective is achieve audit efficiency without compromising the audit quality. That is what we saw in the particular paragraph given in the quotation. Use sampling to focus on high value or risk items. As I said, the auditor will have to apply his judgment where exactly the population is heavy in terms of value or heavy in terms of volume, or there is a heightened possibility of risk happening. So this judgment of auditor is key in selecting the sample in order to ensure that audit efficiency arises out of the process. As I said earlier, it could be something like sales in a particular region, or purchases from top 10 vendors who constitute about 80% of the material inverted. So something like this will be the type of population that will be chosen to understand what type of sampling we can make. Then we need to also, the auditor will also need to ensure what's the cost that may be incurred in terms of adopting a particular high volume or high risk related actions, and what is the time that is required, whether the auditee has got that much of time to go to wait for the auditor's results in order to ensure that the audit completion is done within the confined date. So these are all other considerations. And then wherever it is required in the current day context, employ technology in choosing the sample, like data analytics or AI supported sampling. Today, AI supported sampling has come dime a dozen in most of the enterprises for intelligent selection. So by virtue of this process, we get efficiency in audit arises from purposeful selection, not random reduction. So this is the third postulate. The fourth postulate is ensure that the results of the sample can be extrapolated reliably to the entire population. The meaning is that when we take a sample, test the sample according to the given method, and arrive at a conclusion, that conclusion or that outcome should be capable of being extrapolated, capable of being posted on other population, other aspects of the population, or other components of the population, so that in every aspect or every component of the population, the result which we have achieved through the sample will be reasonably achieved. Very important that I have achieved a particular type of result, and that result is reflected in the rest of the population in any different form that I am going to adopt. So this particular postulate looks at reliability of the entire population through the result or outcome that we have collected, concluded through the sample. What is the process? I have identified the process something like projection of the errors or deviation to the population logically and consistently. There's a process also that comes up in some of the next slides, namely statistical sampling, non-statistical sampling. How do we need to perform them? Consider both statistical precision and professional judgment in this extrapolation. When we extrapolate the population with reference to the result achieved from a sample, the statistical precision, as we have found out from the sampling, as well as our own judgment, the auditor's judgment in understanding the characteristic of the population, also needs to be understood, needs to be clearly borne in mind while reflecting the character of the population in a total way. Lastly, reassess the sample adequacy, whether I have taken the right amount of sample. For example, if in some pockets or in some contents of the population, the result achieved through sampling is not reliably evident, then we have to look at the component of the sample or characteristics of the sample we have chosen to see that if there are any unexpected or avoidable deviations which have crept into the sample. So that's a very important process. What is it we are going to get out of this process? Given this objective, a sample speaks for the population only when the selection and projection are sound. Selection of the sample and projection, namely the extrapolation of the sample result, are sound or appropriately done. This is a very important process we have to go through. Lastly, the support the auditor's conclusion with sufficient evidence and documentation. Documentation is the key to any audit process. An audit concluded without enough of documentation does not come into the process of audit at all. The quality process ensures and encompasses documentation as a major requirement. So much so, the audit sampling process also requires appropriate documentation to be done by the auditor through the entire process of sampling, sample testing, and extrapolation and arriving at the conclusion. So the right process, as I listed, maintain detailed documentation of how you have selected the sample, what type of sample you have selected, where exactly the samples are being applied, all those things for documentation. Then record the sample selection, testing results. What are all the results that have become document wise or area wise, or in case if it is a customer who has been chosen, for example, an organization L&T where they have 3 lakh suppliers. No exaggeration. We are doing a project in L&T. There are 3 lakh suppliers in L&T construction division in Chennai itself. For 3 lakhs suppliers to be tested, humanly impossible to test every suppliers. So in that case, a sample of the suppliers itself will have to be applied. Not only the sample of the supplier supplied materials or documents generated by the supplier, even the supplier also will have to be reasonably selected through a sampling process, so that will reflect the right results of the entire population. What is that we are going to get out of this particular objective on the process? Well documented sampling is the auditor's best defense and audit's strongest foundation. So documentation is the most important foundation. So much so, well documented sampling will create the best defense for the auditor. Why I am giving very great emphasis for these 5 postulates is that these 5 postulates overall bring the essence of the SA 530. Whatever we are going to now see after this are going to be only explanative in terms of the essence of these postulates, so that we will have a better understanding of what are the contents of SA 530 standard in its full extent and in full context. So let's get into let us get into the basic concepts of sampling. This is one major, or rather very standard structure of audit sampling process. The basic sampling concepts, audit sampling concepts are: A, nature and purpose of audit sampling. What is the nature and the purpose for which I am adopting a sampling process? Is it difficult to adopt a universal testing? So if it is universal testing is not possible, then what is the purpose for which this sample testing is adopted? That is, again, as I said earlier, documentation. Uncertainty and audit sampling. Based on previous years' evidences, audit reports, or other audit working papers, the auditor will need to do afresh for the next year what are all the uncertainties or risk that have been associated with the organization or clients' transactions and processes. That will lead you to select the appropriate audit sampling process. Then, having identified that, what are sampling risk and non-sampling risk? Suppose I do a sampling, what risks are associated? If I don't do sampling and I do at random, or I do at some amount of judgment, what are all the other risks? Then what is statistical sampling? What is non-statistical sampling? So these are all the basic concepts enshrined in this particular standard. And the standard also deals with test of controls, substantive test, as the two major processes by which the sample selected will need to be tested as per the given process. By test of controls, a particular process is adopted and particular methodology is given, and what type of results arise out of it, and what type of conclusion we can arrive from that result. Similarly, in substantive test also, there's a specific given process that do not involve audit sampling, then framework for audit sampling through substantive tests. So these are all given parameters as per the standard, and we apply this substantive test. Then there are other statistical sampling, test of controls, means per unit sampling. These are all other statistical addendum that we need to maintain in order to ensure that the sample that we have chosen have conformed to the standard that is prescribed, and also to ensure that we have not missed out the characteristic of the population while selecting the sample. So this is the basic framework of the standard in this particular box. Then comes, we went through a process terminology called statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling. This is nothing but a statistical sampling runs through a method in certain amount of regularity and in terms of certain amount of compliance or conviction. Random systematic monetary unit sampling is one method. Objective, it is objective quantifiable sampling risk arise out of it, and often supported by software. A random statistical sampling is one which is supported either by AI or by data analytics or by the latest digital devices and digital tools that are available. Whereas in the case of a non-statistical sampling, as I said earlier, it could be judgmental, it could be something like chosen from uh, at the will and pleasure of the auditor, or will and pleasure of sometimes even the client also, then we do not get into a, an appropriate and regulated process. It does not go through a regulated process. Sometimes block sampling. I am going to test only the month of April for purpose of verifying the population. It is not always possible to say that the month of April, all transactions in the month of April will reflect the entire year's transactional characteristics. It is not possible to say. And therefore, that's that type of sampling called block sampling. Based on auditors' professional judgment, having run through the profession for so long and having seen different clients and different establishments, size of establishments, and the transactional nature of the establishments, auditor sometimes applies his professional judgment in choosing, yeah, a particular type of sample. It could be one from for example, if it is relating to testing again the suppliers, it could be some amount of suppliers from northern region, some amount of suppliers giving components to the particular type of line item, etc., etc. Because he knows pretty well out of his own professional judgment and experience in that particular organization. It was the case earlier, not necessarily now, because you have the rotation of auditor, which employs 5 plus 5 years as the maximum. So whatever experience you would have gained during this period in the audit, he applies his professional judgment. And common in small audits. In most of the small firm audits, the non-statistical sampling is very common. So my thrust here is audit sampling is not a shortcut. It is the auditor's bridge between efficiency and assurance. If you want to give good assurance to the shareholders to whom you are responsible, it is important that you choose the right method of sampling which conforms to the processes listed out in the standard and which very effectively and reliably reflects the population. So the process of sampling is run through like this. Uh, I don't know whether I need to run through it. Let whatever I have said earlier is the process that is defined in this flow chart. This flow chart says what are all the steps you need to adopt. Determine the test objective, determine the procedures to meet the objectives, how many items are going to be examined, whether it is 100 out of a 10,000 or 100 out of a lakh, what is the type of sampling method and sampling ratio adopted, and then again it drills down to other things like define the population and the sampling unit that you are adopted. I have earlier said there is a sampling unit like monetary unit or inventory related unit or supplier units, number of suppliers. There could be any type of sampling unit that you can adopt. This is common in both statistical and non-statistical. Then determine the sample from the given model, explicitly recognize relevant factors. This is very important because this touches into the testing of evidence and the risk which follows in the subsequent slides. Similarly, under non-statistical corresponding to this, determine the sample judgmentally, because non-statistical is a judgmental sampling test. Implicitly recognize relevant factors. Why implicitly? Here, the judgment of the auditor based on his own experience, based on his previous testing processes and conclusions arrived at, he implicitly recognizes the relevant factors which compel him to go through a judgmental sampling process. So this is the essence of the step 5. Step 6, select representative sample randomly. Randomly meaning by performing a particular method. Here it is judgmentally done. This representative sample is done judgmentally. Apply audit procedures under each of these things, whether it is statistical or non-statistical. Then evaluate the results statistically and judgmentally, whereas here it will be only through judgmental process. So this is the essential process difference between statistical and non-statistical sampling methods, and in both the auditor will have to ensure up-to-date, complete and comprehensive document collection and conclusion. Okay, I have run through all these things quite elaborately earlier. I'll just run through them right now in the context of what exactly the underlying concepts mean, nature and purpose of audit sampling. If there are if the population is reasonably less, where the auditor can go through an exhaustive sample testing process, use less than 100% of the items, not necessarily the 100%, but it could be something less than that, where the auditor's time involvement, cost involvement is a factor to be applied. Then apply the sample that you have selected to the entire population to see whether it is reflective of the population's characteristics. Very important. Uncertainty and audit sampling. As I said, uncertainty is a risk. In order to avoid or avert that risk, what type of test and controls, risk controls the auditor will have to go through. These are all the essential processes which we are going to see. Sampling risk, sample versus population. Are we characterizing the sample with reference to the population that we have chosen? This is one major process we have to go through. Test of controls. As I already said, there are two types of testing. One is test of control and another one is a substantive test. So in the test of control, risk of assessing control risk is too low. Risk of assessing control risk too high. So these are the two areas where we need to assess whether the sample that we have chosen will exactly reflect and bring this particular type of testing possibility. Then in substantive testing, risk of incorrect acceptance, because it is judgmentally done. So if I am not getting the right and correct judgment, whether there is a risk of accepting an incorrect statement or incorrect result, and then risk of incorrect rejection. Suppose the audit sample is going to be rejected, what is the effect of it? What is the reprocess that has to be done? Then when planning the sample, there are certain considerations or certain important points which the auditor will need to note. Relationship of the sample to the relevant audit objective. What is audit objective I have chosen? I want to see whether the foreign exchange outflow of the company in terms of payments to suppliers, in terms of payments to service providers outside of India have gone through the right processes, right procedures described in FEMA. This is one audit objective. Then how am I to choose the audit sample for this? Particular company has got, say, about 2 lakh transactions in a particular year in terms of outflow of forex to different suppliers and different service providers. So we have, with the sample that we have chosen, should reflect the exact audit objective. My audit objective is to see that whether the controls as enshrined in FEMA in terms of payment to outside in foreign exchange to overseas parties have been rightly complied with. The right compliance could be in the form of the compliance to income tax requirements, compliance to FEMA, the various foreign exchange control requirements, etc. So therefore, that particular objective, if it is to be met, what is the sample I have to choose? So this is one extreme case I am now pointing out in order to ensure that selection of a sample is not just something like throwing a dice in the tray in the board game and saying 5, 6, etc. Selection of a sample is a major process for the auditor. Then materiality. If I am going to get certain amount of misstatement in the deviation rate, what is the materiality I need to apply? So this one we have to consider. Then allowing sampling risk, characteristics of the population. So there are n number of things. The standard prescribes it. I don't want to repeat again the standard. Then Test of controls versus substantive test, there is a specific mention in the standard as to what exactly the purpose of these two testing process. Test of controls is done to estimate the rate of deviations from prescribed controls in a population. So, in a population, if there are specific controls that are exercised over a period of time or over a particular transaction processing zone, and the sampling that we have chosen should estimate the rate of deviations, which will throw a comparison to the prescribed controls. So this is the test of controls, application of the controls. Whereas in a substantive test, to estimate the total dollar amount, dollar in the sense monetary value of a population, or the dollar amount of an error in population, X percentage of the X amount of the error in the, or rather the sampling versus the X amount of the population, how does it characterizes the entire population? This is one reflective test, and such a reflective test will have to be applied in a particular context. When performing a test of control, there are certain processes like determine the objective of the test. Whatever we have seen earlier in one slide, like the points to consider, more or less applies here too. Only something which are different is specify the risk of assessing controls that are too low and what is the tolerable deviation rate. This is a very critical process. The auditor will have to determine ahead of the sampling or ahead of the testing process. Estimate the population sample size and the deviation rate. What is the permitted deviation rate, tolerable deviation rate, which we have already fixed, and against that, how much it has, the result is showing. Select the sample, apply the testing method, evaluate the sample results, and document the sampling procedure adopted. This is a tabulation of what is the process of test of controls. How do I need to apply the type of sampling risk that can come across while doing the test of controls? Then how do I evaluate such risk, and how do I conclude whether the results arising out of sample reflect the entire population? So the first process, as I said, to true operating effectiveness of the client's internal controls. How much of the client's internal controls is characterized by the population? True operating effectiveness of the client's internal controls, that becomes the overarching objective. In that, we have two major subdivisions called actual control support the planned assessed level of control risk. Actual controls do not support the planned assessed level of control risk. Two possibilities. In that, if I apply the assessed level of control risk based on the left hand side, as you see, assessed level of control risk based on the sample, I take sample results support the planned assessed level of control risk. I get the first result postulate, namely the sample results support the planned assessed level of control risk. Then in the first decision chart, I have come to a correct decision in terms of the applying the test of controls process. In the second one, there is a risk of assessing control risk too low. So there could be a possibility of audit ineffective. So what do I do in case if I get such a decision or such a result? Again, I have to improve the test of control effectively over the process. So this is a repetitive test to be applied. The second application, results application, namely, sample results do not support the planned assessed level of control risk. So, again, in this case, the risk of assessing control risk is too low because the audit is inefficient. That means it results in the characteristic of the people who have conducted the audit or the tool adopted by the auditor in employing the audit sampling and applying the audit sampling test to the population. Therefore, it is audit inefficient. And therefore, again, as I said, correct decision meaning whatever we have arrived at is correct, in the sense the audit inefficiency is right. So this is one major process which the standard has prescribed in order to arrive at how do I apply test of controls in order to arrive at the test results through sampling, and whether the test results reflect the character of the population with reference to the overarching objective. The overarching objective in the present case is effective operating effectiveness of the client's internal control process. So in this particular context, this is one major process we need to adopt through the test of control. The next one, substantive testing. Again, more or less the processes are the same, except that determine the sample size and select the sample for testing. Test the sample size using the testing method we have chosen, namely the judgmental method we have chosen. Evaluate the sample results and document the sampling procedure adopted. Here, the testing process more or less remains the same, but there are certain inherent characteristic difference in terms of applying the testing process and adopting the audit, applying the audit method here. And at the end, when we arrive at the results will be with reference to the judgmental testing that we have adopted, namely substantive testing we have adopted. Again, here, the types of sampling risk through substantive testing is given by the standard in this particular matrix. Again, true state of clients, recorded account balance. So the same, more or less the same one here. When does a correct decision come? Sample estimate of the account balance of error in the account. The sample results support the conclusion that the account balance is correct. Then materially it is a correct decision. The other one is a reverse. Then in which case, when there is a material misstatement, risk of incurrent acceptance leads to audit ineffectiveness. Risk of incurrent rejection leads to audit inefficiency. Rejection arises through efficiency in terms of people or process or devices. So this is how the two tests are being performed. Sample size, the characteristic of the sample I mentioned, this is something which we can skip. In terms of time, I'm just running through because there are more important aspects that we need to look into here. Audit sampling, evaluation of the results. How do we do it? Evaluation of the results post sample testing is a very important key process. Why is it? Because we have already held out that audit sampling should reflect the characteristic and nature of the population in order to arrive at a reasonable control, whether the controls are effective, operative, and able to meet the desired objective. Therefore, if I have to mention that, I have to evaluate the results through a particular process. How do I evaluate the results? That is what in evaluating, there are certain considerations that we need to take into action. One is project misstatements from sample to population. What are all the misstatements that arise? Because misstatement often comes in the auditor's report. Material misstatement, risk of material misstatement. These are all some of the postulates that we come across in some of the other standards like 500, 230, etc. The project misstatements from sample to population. This is a key process, key evaluation criteria to be adopted. Then consider the qualitative aspects. Nature of misstatement. What are the type of misstatements? Whether the account balance is not reflecting the correct nature of the client's transaction in a particular area. How do I evaluate such results? Then if sampled results indicate possible material misstatement is a bigger term, then we need to perform extended methods, extended procedures, like what a doctor does when the diagnosis and the test results do not conclude right impact of the patient's health condition, the doctor will perform certain more extended procedures. It could be something like MRI or CT scan or something more than the normal diagnostic processes. Similar to that, the auditor will have to perform here when there is a material misstatement. Then documentation in an ACA 230, rationale for selection of the sample size, all this. Documentation is the cornerstone for audit success. There is nothing beyond documentation that supports the auditor in the event of any confrontation or in the event of any conflict. So I have just completed the process of whatever the standard has prescribed in terms of what is sampling, what are the concepts of sampling, what are the risks associated with sampling, what are the methods and techniques of sampling, what are the tests to be adopted in testing the sample, namely the test of controls or substantive testing, and then what results we arrive at through the sampling. How do we evaluate the sampling results to the characteristic of the population? These are all the overall aspects of the audit sampling standard. They give you a bird's eye view of how sampling will have to be performed. But beyond that, there are certain other things both the auditor and the audience also will need to understand in terms of linking this particular standard, SA 530, to other audit standards. And what should be the auditor's focus in such cases? I have taken, I think, 4 or 5 other standard I have taken. I will run through them very quickly, so much so that the understanding of this, the audience is able to gain. SA 200, overall objectives of the independent auditor. SA 530, we know it is all about sampling, audit sampling. SA 200, overall objectives of the independent auditor. Given this context of overall objectives of the independent auditor, auditor's objectives, reasonable assurance through sampling. So what is the audit objective? I get reasonable assurance through sampling. How do I connect to SA 200? Because SA 200 speaks about overall objective of the independent auditor. So yes, here the overall responsibility, how does SA 200 establishes? That is to say that SA 200 looks at obtaining reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Connect this to SA 530. Exactly, that is what we need to do. Material misstatement through the audit sampling process, testing process, evaluation process, and the results extrapolation. So this one by one chained process, if we adopt correctly, we come to SA 200 through SA 530. Sorry. SA 530 provides a practical mechanism to achieve the assurance when examining only a portion of the population. So the connect between SA 200 and SA 530 is that when I want to achieve the overall responsibility of ensuring that the financial statements are free of material misstatement, SA 530 provides the mechanism to achieve that assurance. Then sampling under SA 530 must therefore be planned, performed, evaluated in a manner consistent with SA 200's core principles of professional skepticism, due care or due diligence, and judgment. This is very important. This professional skepticism, due care, and judgment come in the audit report in a particular paragraph immediately in the first page itself. Therefore, professional skepticism, something can go wrong, or there could be a possibility of mistake. So that particular risk is always associated with the audit process, eventually with the audit sampling process also. That is why SA 200 states auditor will adopt always professional skepticism, due care, and judgment while coming to a conclusion whether the financial statements give a true and fair state of affairs of the company free of any material misstatement. So, in order to arrive at that conclusion, SA 230, sorry, 530 must be performed very, very reliably and effectively. So the essence is SA 200 gives the why of assurance, SA 530 operationalizes the how when complete examination is impractical. That is to say that audit sampling overrides examination of the complete population. When do I conclude that audit sampling through auditing through sampling overrides the complete examination, impracticality of the complete examination only when the why of assurance is operationalized through SA 530 processes and procedures. So this is the linkage between SA 530 and SA 200. Very clearly to be understood, while performing SA 530, SA 200 is to be the cornerstone but which we need to keep always side by side. Then SA 230, audit documentation. The less said, the better, because anything done without documentation is something like doing purposeless action in order to achieve something about which we are not aware of at all. So auditor's weapon is documentation. As I said, in order to protect the auditor from any confrontation, conflict, or any other eventuality, audit documentation comes as the major support and defense. SA 230 requires auditors to document nature, timing, extent of audit procedures performed, which includes sampling. So I don't want to elaborate more on this because every sampling activity the auditor should record. What are the processes adopted in selecting the sample? What are the tests adopted? What are the results out of the test are adopted? How did you postulate whether the test characterizes the population? How was the evaluation done? Everything the auditor will have to document because your ECQR is also there subsequently. In order to pass through the ECQR test, auditors will have to maintain every documentation, even for sampling also. So the essence is what is not documented is not done. Sampling must leave a very clear audit trail. Sampling must provide that the audit was performed effectively, efficiently, and ensuring that the sample results reflect the true character of the population. So this is the essence of linkage between SA 530 and SA 230. Then SA 500, audit evidence. What is evidence? Something which is that what has happened is uh, supported by either some amount of documented evidence or some amount of other believable and presentable evidence. So the audit evidence to auditor is what Upanishads and Vedas are to the Sanatan. So this is a very important thing which the auditor will have to ensure. Evidence is the essence of audit. I just would like to state here, SA sampling under SA 530 directly contributes to this, that is evidence, collecting the evidence through the audit sampling process. How much evidence is sufficient through the sampling process, which characterizes the entire population's characteristics. This sampling should characterize that the population is reflected correctly. So that is the essence of SA 530. That is the essence of SA 500, namely audit evidence. So the evidence collected through sampling should also be equitably applicable for SA 500 in terms of audit evidence. The essence of this here is SA 500 defines the quality and quantity of evidence, whereas SA 530 provides the pathway to obtain that efficiently. So this is the essence. This is a punch statement. Then SA 315, identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. I already told you sometime earlier, thus this risk of material misstatement, ROMM, is a key process for the auditor. It's a key concept for the auditor. Whenever any audit procedure is performed, this material misstatement, whether there could be a possibility of misstatement that can happen in respect of the client's operational controls. Therefore, identifying, assessing the risk of material misstatement as enshrined in 315 is also important and integrated to SA 530. How? SA 315 complements the risk through sampling in SA 530. This is the essence of that particular integration is SAF 315 complements the risk through sampling in SA 530. How does it do? SA 315 asks you to do understand the entity and its environment to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement. How do I, by virtue of the operation procedure enshrined in 315, I need to understand whether the entity's environment and the other characteristics I am applying through the procedures in 315 give me the confidence that there is no risk of material misstatement. In order to get this result, what 315 has wanted, 530 will have to be substantively provide the support. How does it support? Uses the assessed risk to design the nature, timing, and extent of sampling procedures. So when you select the sample, this risk which are identified in 315 and through the processes in 315 should form part of the sample testing process. So that is why he said nature, timing, and extent of sampling procedures. High risk areas demand larger, more representative, more targeted samples. Obviously, it could not be only one basket of sample, it could be multiple basket of samples. So low risk probably may not require more sample. It could be even through judgmental process. So what is the essence? What is the postulate we get here? Risk assessment under ACA 315 defines where to look. Where do you need to look? Whereas SA 530 defines how to look effectively. So the key message is risk drives sampling, sampling substantiate assurance. Risk is a part of SA 315, sampling substantiating assurance is a part of SA 530. Both of them go together and provide you the support that there is no risk of material misstatement. Then SA 330, auditor's response to assessed risk. This is another major essay in terms of how the assessed risk will have to be reviewed by the auditor and what type of response the auditor will have to provide in his own wisdom to conclude that either the operational controls are really operative or whether there is a risk of misstatement through this assessed risk. Assessed risk, that is a very important part which we need to understand here. SA 330 strengthens the audit quality through guidance for risk through sampling. How does it do? SA 330's purpose is audit quality through assessed risk, giving the right response to the assessed risk. How do I achieve it? Through the right process in the sampling. SA 330 complements SA 530 by guiding how the auditors respond to identified risk using substantive audit procedures, often implemented through sampling. Sampling serves as one of the key audit responses for obtaining persuasive evidence in risk areas highlighted in SA 315. We saw SA 315 some time back. So there is a tri-linkage here between use his sampling process in order to ensure that he is able to make 315 and 330 represent it very clearly. What the auditor's primary focus is heightened reliability of the financial statements through audit sampling. So integrating the requirements of other standards helps the auditor to get the best of the reliability of the controls, operational controls. How? Auditor's primary focus should be to design sampling with intent, grounded risk assessment, as in SA 315, aimed at gathering sufficient evidence, as in SA 500, documented transparently with evidence, as in SA 230, and evaluated in alignment with overall objectives of SA 200, responsibility of the auditor. So, this is the auditor's primary focus in integrating all these standards in order to bring one concept of no material risk misstatement. Focus is not on the number of items, but on the strength of assurance obtained through the combination of all the standards. Professional judgment is the key in terms of the linkage between risk, evidence, and conclusion, ensuring sample results truly support the opinion of the auditor. Because ECQR in their testing process goes through this particular third line item which you have mentioned. ECQR will look at professional judgment, whether there is a linkage between risk, evidence, and conclusion, whether the sampling results reflect the opinion of the auditor. So this is what ECQR will look at. We have to be very clear about it. Last, essence of an effective auditor connects the dots between these standards, ensuring every sample speaks of the language of assurance. Assurance, assurance, assurance. That's the only thing. Then last portion is the global comparison, which I thought will be important for the auditors as well as the audience. I have taken four major global standards. One is ISA 530, which is prescribed by the IFAC, PCAOB AS 2315, which is the US standard, AACPA, which is also of the US, but it has prescribed to its own auditors, certified public accountants, C530. Then internal audit. Institute of Internal Auditors have also given guidance in terms of sampling. So what is the key focus under each? IFAC places focus on mirrors SA 530 uniform definitions. More or less it is same. So in terms, international alignment is maintained. There is no aberration here. There is no aberration as far as ISA 530 is concerned. PCAOB 2315. PCA 2315 emphasizes audit evidence and judgment. So by virtue of audit evidence and judgment, relate to your two other standards, which we have seen now, 230 and the other one, 315. Here, in order against that, we get more risk-based and control-centric results. Risk-based results, risk-based intelligence, and control-centric conclusions are arrived at. AICPA C530, similar to ISA, strong linkage to risk-based approach. Because after all, AICPA is a certified public accountant's procedure, and therefore it is explicit on non-statistical use. That is the only key difference here. IAA guidance, very important, sampling in continuous and operational audits, because Internal audit is not a one-time audit. Probably they may take one area in at one particular point of time, but they are doing an entity's internal controls testing, internal controls risk management test, risk testing over a period of time consecutively through different methodologies, through different population methods. And therefore, the accent of sampling in internal IAA procedures and standards is entirely different. It focuses on continuous and operational audits, integrates with analytics and risk-based frameworks. Analytics, namely the data analytics and other digital support. Risk-based frameworks, again, CRMA or there are many other risks, risk management standards that are in focus. So the essence is here on internal audit, I would say. Internal audit sampling often integrates with continuous monitoring and automated analytics because for them it is a continuous process. Selecting exceptions via ERP data filters. This is an essential difference between internal audit to statutory audit. And audit sampling, practical utility in modern auditing. Very important. Contemporary auditing involves technology because today technology has grown multiple size, multifold in terms of its existence, in terms of its applicability, extension, etc., etc. An audit done through audit artificial intelligence or robotic process automation or any other device supported, technology supported is far superior to the manual audit, no doubt about it. So technology efforts today, one, audit efficiency. Sampling supports audit efficiency, covering large data with limited effort because technology is able to cull out the nature of the transactions through various automated processes that are enshrined in the AI tool. Moves beyond random selection. Now it is risk focused. That is the cornerstone for any audit process. Example, sampling invoices with higher materiality risk, sampling IT access logs where segregation of duties is a high risk. Today, this maker checker control has become a major control risk in every RMC risk, sorry, RCM, and therefore that becomes a major part of the auditor's process in the current technology supported audit process. Then lastly, integration with CATS, computer assisted audit techniques, Excel, IDEA, ACL, AI based analytical tools are also the multiple possibilities. And application of technology, again, as I said, smart sampling and predictive sampling. When you apply technology as against manual sampling, be be focused on smart sampling and predictive sampling. These are two essential characteristics of a technology supported sampling. Then use AI to identify outliers and patterns. Outliers meaning the characteristics can come out of the sample that you have chosen, and the pattern of frauds or pattern of red flag areas can come out. Effectively sampling by exception. Then continuous audit frameworks, which applies to internal audit. Not, as I said, internal audit is not once a year, it is continuous throughout the year. Risk dashboards, again, another effect of the technology supported audit sampling, audit testing process. Then AI based anomaly detection, predictive adaptive sampling, and real time sampling are some of the technology supported processes which can be adopted even by the statutory auditors, though they are generally prescribed for continuous audits. Then practical application, statutory audit, substantive testing, and control testing. The statutory audit is not going to focus on universal testing process. Through the sampling, they will ensure that there is a substantive testing process adopted to arrive at the characteristic of the population. Internal audit, risk weighted sampling. the characteristics of the sampling should be risk weighted, because what are the risks associated with the business processes? Whether the business model can effectively bring the documented business model requirements, business model outcome of the organization. So, internal audit's focus is always risk focused. They take their audit plan only through the risk that is enshrined in the organization's processes and transactions. By virtue of that, the risk weighted sampling for a continuous auditing makes sense. Forensic audits, anomaly focused audit. As I said, it could be through a butterfly approach. It can take into any type of transactional requirements and see where there is a honey sitting, where there is a stickiness. Forensic audits will apply. Stickiness, honey sitting will be, that is to say that fraud assessment. Forensic is always identified with fraud assessment or fraud risk assessment. Data analytics and data analytics based audits, sampling with the data filters exception. Lastly, beyond the standard, I just want to touch on ACA 530 provides key strength to the quality of the audit, ensures reliability. We have seen all through that. Only thing I'll say, sampling is equal to intelligent selection. Through audit sampling, judgment meets evidence, transforming uncertainty into audit assurance, This is one, I am inspired by this statement out of the book which I referred to in the beginning. And lastly, audit sampling challenges and conclusions. There are certain amount of challenges and common errors can creep through sampling process. Sometimes over reliance on small samples, which we need to adopt. So this could be through a passionate process the auditor could adopt. So that some of these things the auditor will need to overcome. Then inadequate documentation, as I said earlier, without documentation, there is nothing that is there in a sampling process. Misjudging the population homogeneity. That is to say, when I select a particular type of sample for one region and another type of sample for another region, so that I feel that there could be the homogeneity in the character of the population. If I misjudge that, then again you have to go back to your testing process as in the test of controls. So don't misjudge the population just by virtue of audit sample homogeneity. What is the conclusion we get? Sampling as a balance of judgment, efficiency, and assurance. That is what technology supports sampling, but we need to be very cautious about the AI driven audits. From random selection, we should focus on risk based intelligence through sampling. Auditors' confidence in conclusion rests on examining everything. Sorry, auditors' confidence in conclusion rests not on examination of everything, but on examining enough wisely. Again, from SA 530, audit sampling standard, I am quoting this. With this, I have come to the end of the session, almost about 45 minutes ahead of the time that is given to me. Can I close the presentation? Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, can I close the presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm now open for any question, any.
Okay. Sir, first of all, we would like to thank you, sir. And thank you so much for such a excellent session and sharing your deep insights on uh, audit sampling and covering all the aspects and the relationship with other standards. So thank you so much, sir. And in today's webinar, we have joined by more than 700 members.
Oh, thank
And
you. Thank you.
And we have received some queries from the members. So I would like to request you to please take these questions and address these questions. So I will read the questions and also put the question in chat box for your reference.
Yeah, please.
So the first question, sir, if an auditor tests 40 invoices out of 4,000 and finds only two errors, so how should they project the misstatement to the population, and what factors will affect whether they whether they expand the sample or not?
Very focused question. See, the selection of 40 invoices out of 400 should read to the uh, type of invoice, the type of transaction that are involved in these 4,000 invoices. If they are multifarious, different type of transactions involved in these 4,000 invoices, different products, different pricing methodologies, etc., then selection of these 40 invoices for a population of 4,000 may exactly not be the right appropriate sampling process. If you go to test of controls, I have identified there, 1 minute. I'll just take to that. See, I have said actual controls support the planned assessed level of control risk. So if I come to this particular question which the gentleman has asked, project the misstatement to the population. When the misstatement to the population can happen? When the assessed risk is not meeting the desired level of controls that are existing or that are observed to be existing in the operation, in the organization's overall internal control framework. If this particular thing is not reflected, then finding two errors out of a sample of 40 for a population of 4,000 may not exactly be the right option and right procedure, and therefore the misstatement cannot be ruled out. So what we need to do in such cases, we need to be focused in terms of identifying the characteristics of the population. If that 4,000 invoices involve different zones or different products, different services rendered, etc., place your sample in such a way that the samples reflect the type of divisions or type of subdivisions you are going to look into. So, for example, I have 10 products and each product is materially different. Then but the overall invoicing level is 4,000. Probably I need to select maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of each of these products and see whether the by virtue of a product selection and the sample out of each product reflects the overall characteristics of the risk associated with those invoicing process or sale process, and then arrive at a conclusion, overall conclusion. In this, I have already mentioned in the presentation, one major thing I have mentioned here, actual controls do not support the planned assessed level of control risk. The same thing will need to be applied here, whether the planned assessed level of control risk or arrived at through your selection sample selection process. If it is not, material misstatement will not be material misstatement will be inevitable. I think I have answered.
Okay, sir. So the next question is, in non-statistical sampling, what documentation must the auditor maintain to demonstrate representativeness and
Very good.
sufficiency of the sample?
I outlined. I'll just go back to the presentation again. In a non-statistical sampling, I just said one important thing here. Non-statistical sample, judgmental haphazard block sampling. So in order to ensure that the judgmental nature of the sampling which the auditor has chosen, he has to place reliance on what exact judgments he has placed in order to arrive at a particular type of sampling. Suppose he takes a block sampling. I said April month I am taking. Why did I take April month? Whether by virtue of my past experience, the transactions happening in April month are too high to therefore my sample chosen in the month of April will have the entire characteristic of the population. So all these things the auditor will have to jot down in his audit books and ensure that for each of the process he has chosen, whether it is judgmental or block sampling, he must maintain his own conclusions in arriving at that sample and what type of sample he has chosen, whether it is with reference to a period or whether it is with reference to a geographical zone, etc. And then what is the auditor's professional judgment? I also told you about the auditor's professional judgment. In the past, what has been the auditor's conclusions arrived at in these judgmental or block sampling? So based on that, the auditor's professional judgment will have to be linked. Again, the documentation will have to mention what was the previous professional judgment the auditor has arrived at while making the opinion. How does he conclude in the present sampling for this judgment and block sampling, and what are the type of conclusions arrived at, whether they pass through the test of control or substantive testing, and whether the results characterizes the population's characters. So this particular documentation the auditor will have to willy-nilly maintain, and for this purpose if we go through SA 530, I think paragraph, some major paragraph at the end, I think paragraph 22 or 23, list out what are all the type of documents to be maintained in a non-statistical process.
Okay. And sir, the next question is, can artificial intelligence replace the traditional audit sampling approach by enabling auditor to perform 100% audit of inventories or raw material, as demonstrated in the Tata Motors case example?
Very valid question. I would say, see, artificial intelligence has got speed. The type at which the particular technology is able to rave into the population is unimaginable. Okay, but whether the auditor has got time to go through that process. You and I, internal audit can go through a AI supported audit process, and therefore, in fact, I should have touched upon using the reports of other auditors also in the sampling process, because if internal auditor has used sampling as a process of testing the character of the risk and control, the statutory auditor, while referring to that other auditor's report, that particular standard, I think I remember it is SA 570. I'm sorry, I don't remember the number. So that standard also I should have referred in the integration. So be that as it may, my point here is AA affords speed, comprehensiveness, and conclusive evidence of the characteristic of the population. So when it affords speed, conclusive evidence, and comprehensive nature, definitely an auditor, if possible, if there is a cost, he can adopt it, because not every company will be really interested to invest in a similar AI-based tool for the statutory auditor. Perhaps Big Four people can afford an AI-based audit approach, whereas medium-sized firms may not be able to afford an AI-based audit tool or whatever it is. So they select through certain amount of AI combined as well as traditional random-based selection. And as I said, in the case of Tata Motors, or similarly Ashok Leyland, about which I know pretty well, when the inventory is a character of lakhs and lakhs of components, lakhs and lakhs of transactions happening in a month or even in a day also, it is not possible for an auditor whose limited time, the audit time is for a maximum of about 1 month. He can't obviously sit and through the entire stretch, because if it is a listed entity, obviously you have to ensure that you give the accounts by the 30th of April so that they can conduct the board meeting by 15th of May and announce the results immediately thereafter, because they are more worried about the next month and the next year. Every listed entity is worried about it. So the auditor will have to perform during the interim audit or a fractional audit in stages. It could be 3 months, 6 months, 3 months, like that. And therefore, in all these cases, affordability through cost and ability through hiring the artificial intelligence tools is a call which the auditor will have to take. Whether it is Tata Motors or Ashok Leyland or small company like where I am right now engaged, it is not humanly possible for the auditor to rave through every transaction, even if he is going to have a AI-based tool support. But if the auditor is really interested, yes, he can employ an AI tool and go through 100% of the transactions. But practicality is the one which the auditor will have to look at always. Next. You are not audible, Vivek.
Hello, sir, am I audible?
Now you are audible.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for taking this question and address these questions. And thank you, sir, for this session. And I also thank you to all the participants to join us and make it interactive session. So thank
Thank
you,
you very
sir.
much for, sorry, you completed. Sorry. Thank you
Yes, sir. It is.
for ICA AASB for having given me this opportunity. I again thank the 700 participants who had foregone their other works and assembled for this particular SA 530 webinar session. I'm very happy about it. 700 is not a small number. There are 700 auditors who are interested to know what is sampling and other things. More importantly, they are very interested to know something from me. I'm very happy about it. I feel honored. I will give the presentation to the institute shortly. You can always refer to it in the website of the institute.
So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can I close off?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.